Hey guys, it's Taylor Windham. Just coming at you with a video. I tried to record one last week, so it's a little bit delayed. I know it's not uploaded on the YouTube channel, but I had an interruption, so somebody called and it wasn't able to be uploaded, so my wife gave me a buzz. So what I'm going to try to do here is try to crank out one or two videos, each about 10 to 15 minutes long, kind of separated, and go through some of these verses I have highlighted here. So I'll try to make it all the way through, maybe even past verse 9. We'll see what we can do. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago or so, probably from today, I had uploaded a video talking about how the light shines in the darkness and how the darkness has not overcome it or has not understood it. So there's this translational difference. There's a variant in the text here of how the light of the world being Jesus Christ, the light of life, the light of the gospel, the light and the beauty and the knowledge of Jesus Christ that shines from his face, according to 2 Corinthians 4, that light itself has not been understood, and certainly, of course, has not been overcome by the darkness in the world, by the depravity of man, by the wickedness of man, by the wretchedness of man, and his attempts, albeit futile, but his attempts nonetheless to be thwarting God's plan and God's graciousness through Jesus Christ. So it's right in both senses. They're both accurate things to say. I think the best translation for verse 5 is understood it. Overcome it is, of course, another good one that shows the triumph of the glory and the grace and the majesty of Jesus Christ over the sinfulness of man and over the depravity of mankind. There is this truth that is very real and very rich, which is very outstanding, that we always need to hold before our people and before ourselves and our family as we teach our children and we catechize them and raise them up and we point them to Scripture and we teach them sola scriptura. We need to be ever so diligent. We need to be vigilant about the fact that this is a battle. This is a true battle according to Ephesians 6, but it is not a battle that we cannot win. It is not a battle that has not already been won. This is a defeated foe. Satan is a lion on a leash. He has been given authority, but it is not sovereign authority. He has been given power, but he has not been given unilateral totalitarian power. He is not in and of himself powerful. He has derived power just like we do. He is contingent and dependent upon the source of all power, being God himself. And Satan is God's devil. And we always have to remember that. He is not working outside of the purview of God. He's not working outside of the plans of God. He's not working outside of the provision and the sovereignty of God. He is not working outside of the control of God. He is always working exactly according to the will of God the Father. He works these things through secondary causes where God does not, of course, immediately cause sinners to sin, for instance, or cause Satan to fall in Ezekiel in that passage in Isaiah, I believe it's 14. So yes, God is using the devil. We see that in Job as maybe better than any other book. We see the passage in Acts 4 about how the wickedness that was done to Jesus Christ, his betrayal and crucifixion, of course, from Judas and the religious leaders and the Romans and the 30 pieces of silver and on and on and on. We see this continual issue where God is sovereign and yet man is not free, but he is responsible. So man is responsible for his actions, yet God superintends and can govern and can change and can harden and can soften and can regenerate and can turn the heart of any one person so that they attempt evil, wicked, heinous things that then bring glory as part of God's plan. So we know that not only has the darkness not overcome the light, as they tried to do with the crucifixion, death, and burial of Jesus Christ, but they were unsuccessful at that, but they also have been unsuccessful at thwarting God in causing, as Genesis 50 says, all of the bad things that were meant by evil men, Joseph's brothers, that they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. He didn't just use it for good. He didn't just turn it around for good. That darkness has not only not overcome the light, but the light has overcome the darkness. I'm not adding lib to Scripture. I'm not trying to replace the verses that'll follow verse 5, but I am saying very emphatically that we can very strongly assert from the whole of Scripture, from the theological principles we see in the Old and New Testament, that light has not been overcome by the darkness, but rather the light does overcome the darkness. It triumphs in the face of darkness. It trumps the depravity. It trumps the wickedness. It trumps the disgusting, heinous, wicked, evil, depraved, perverted nature of sin. So we talked a lot about, last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about Jesus Christ and Him being the embodiment of light. We talked about Him being, in John 8, the light of the world that brings restoration, that brings clarity and beauty. So now in verse 6, we're going to get into the story. We kind of jump from that prologue that kind of extends all the way from verse 1 to verse 5. We get to verse 6, and now we're kind of jumping into an extension of that. We're kind of jumping into what it means to be in the story, in the context, in the historical context of the redeeming nature and the redeeming unfolding plan of the gospel. I mean, we know Galatians says that Jesus was born of a virgin, and He entered into the world as a man under the law. He bore the curse of the law, and by doing so, He freed us from the curse of the law, and He came into time. He came into space. That's the divine condescension. That is the Logos becoming a man. That is the condescension of God in the person of Jesus Christ, who is the God-man, God-man, fully God, fully man. It's that most beautiful, perplexing, condescending doctrine maybe in all of Scripture, along with the Trinity. It's utterly perplexing, but there were other characters. I think we oftentimes, and rightfully so, place all of the emphasis on Jesus Christ, but there's a story here. I think it's very important to remember when we're sharing the gospel, there's a story of men and women. There's a story of disciples, men and women. There's a story of betrayers. There's a story that God has not just isolated His Son in a vacuum, but He has entered him into time and space, and He lived a real life. He was able to be touched, and He was able to sit down and eat and drink, and He supped with people, and He hugged people, and He touched them, and He loved them, and He slept. And He lived a real physical human life. He was fully man, and He dwelt among real men. The stories are true. And there is really a man that we're getting introduced here to in verse 6, named John the Baptist. We're all familiar with him in the Gospel of Mark. It talks about how he had continual bouts with Herod. Herod loved to talk to him. Herod loved to get into his corner. He respected him. He feared him as a prophet. He feared what the people thought about John the Baptist. John the Baptist, wore camel skins and ate wild honey, and he was very rugged and ragged, and he was not to be appeased and bought off with any amount of coinage. He couldn't be persuaded to be evil. He couldn't be persuaded to give some false prophecy or to despise the plan of God on his life and the call of God on his life, and he would not be swayed. He was Jesus' cousin. He was born around the same time that Jesus was, just barely before. He was truly a man of God and the last prophet in the line of Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and Hosea and so on and so forth. The writing and the non-writing prophets, all of the Old Testament, who are legitimately called and indwelt by the Spirit of God. So he is very much in that line. And so we're kind of, at least in the prologue or the first verses of John, we're introduced to that man for the first time. We're introduced to his mission. We're introduced to what he's doing. We're introduced to where he's going. We're introduced to how he relates to the mission of Jesus Christ here, who's been described in the first 5 verses. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. So, if ever there was a mission statement typed up in clear, bold print, you get it right here in verse 6 and 7, okay? Taken in tandem, I read them both together. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, okay? Very simple, very straightforward. Here's your introduction. You're now meeting a man named John, and he was sent from God, okay? Lest there be any confusion about the history of John the Baptist, because when he's in prison, I believe it's in Matthew 12, I may be wrong. When he's in prison and he wavers, or maybe it's 11, he seems to falter, and it seems that he's losing his faith. It seems that he is falling back into unbelief. It seems that he's wavering on what God has revealed to him and what he believes about Jesus as the Messiah. And now he is at the point where he doesn't quite know if these things are true or not, because Jesus, in his opinion, in John's opinion, and wrongly so, sinfully so, but he believes that Jesus has not shown him enough detail, that Jesus has not shown him enough things, that he's not revealed enough. He's not brought about revolution. He's not brought about social revolution. He's not done the things, and he's not progressed enough through what John thought was Jesus' mission, enough for John to say, you know what, look, I'm suffering here in the darkness. I'm suffering here in the middle of this persecution. I'm languishing in jail. I'm just lingering here. There seems to be no end. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. So Jesus, my disciples are coming to you, and I need you to tell me if indeed you are the Christ, if you are the Messiah, or if I'm in here for no reason, or if I'm preaching for someone else and I'm waiting on someone else and you are just a decoy. You're just like me. You're just a prophet that's being sent. You're just a miracle working prophet and teacher and moralizer, right? I need to see if you're just one in the long line, or if you are he himself, if you're the one that we've all been waiting on, right? And Jesus quotes from Isaiah and talks about the deaf receiving hearing and the blind receiving sight and the lame walking. And he's talking about the fact, as this messianic passage here is given to John to be sent back to John, he's saying, look, John, don't doubt who I am. Don't doubt what I've done. Don't doubt what it is. You know, don't waver. We both know, and I know that you know. So don't go back and vacillate between belief and unbelief. You are stronger than this. You have been told. You know what your mission is. Don't waver from it. He didn't outright say, yeah, I'm the dude. You know that, John. Yeah, of course. He says, look, here are the signs that you were supposed to look for, and here are the signs that are being done in my ministry. So I suggest that you, John, go stick to the signs and that you make good on what you have promised. Other than that, I ask that you continue to be faithful to what you've been called to do. So we know John, at the beginning of his ministry, says that he is unfit to carry the sandals of Jesus. We know that he says he is unfit to literally carry the strap or tie the strap on his shoe, his sandal. He's not even worthy enough to do that. So John understands that his role compared to that of Jesus Christ is one of submission. It's one of a lower ranking authority. It's a position. He's a prophet. But in the parable later on Jesus will give, he's one of the tenants, but he is not the son of the landowner. This is John's lot. This is his role, and he understands it. So he is the man who was sent by God, and he was the last prophet to be so. Okay? He came as a witness. Now, he came as a witness for a very, very specific purpose, and that was to be a herald, a forerunner, the Elijah, if you will, of the Messiah who was to come. So his goal, his objective, was to be the forerunner, the witness who would run through the streets, blasting the trumpet. The Messiah was here. The Messiah is here. The Messiah is here. That was John's goal. That was his mission. That was his purpose. That is what he existed for. So this, as we see in verse 7, is saying that he was there to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. Okay? That all might believe through John, and all might believe through John's message in Jesus Christ.